This is Joe narrating a PowerPoint on page 450 of the Kaplan book. It's in Social Studies, Civics and Government, Lesson 4, about the electoral system. This is talking about how we elect our presidents. So the elections every 2 years are elections for the legislative branch of the federal government. The House of Representatives, the people in there, run every 2 years. In the Senate, a third of the senators run for office every 2 years, so their term is 6 years. The executive branch, the president and vice president, they run every 4 years. So every 2 years there's a national election, and there's people in the House running, people in the Senate running, and then every other election, or every 4 years, there's a election for president. The third branch of government, the judicial branch, those justices in the Supreme Court are not elected. They are appointed by the president and approved by the Senate. And all these rules are in the rule book of the United States, which is the Constitution. So anyone can run for president. There are certain requirements, of course, in the Constitution. For example, you have to be 35, you have to be a resident of this country for 14 years, you have to be a native-born citizen, but it is open to anyone who meets those qualifications. In the United States, currently, there are two predominant parties: the Democrat Party, which is symbolized by the donkey on the left, and the Republican Party, which is symbolized by the elephant on the right. You may hear talk of blue states and red states. The blue state refers to states that traditionally vote majority Democrat, and the red states are states that traditionally vote majority Republican. This is a pie chart showing the political parties' membership in 2008, looking at all Americans. On the left, you see 51% of Americans recognize themselves as being Democrats, 37% Republican, 11% Independent. There are other parties, for example, the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Socialist Party. They make up a very small percent. Each political party, in time for the elections, will draw up what's called a platform. A platform basically says what they're going to do and what they stand for. This is often divided into different topics. For example, this diagram shows how the Republicans and the Democratic platforms differ as far as abortion, or life at the top. Marriage, for example, gay marriage, has been an issue. Healthcare, should universal healthcare be available to everyone? And the Second Amendment on bottom refers to the right to bear arms. So sometimes there is distinct policy differences between the people running on the Republican side and people on the Democratic side. And people can choose which issues to vote for by voting for those candidates. This is a flow chart of how to become president of the United States. On the upper left, you have to meet the Constitution's requirements, as I noted before. Then most presidential candidates will pick a party. They'll run in the primary elections as that party's representative. These usually happen over many months, starting about a year before the general election. Gradually, one of the candidates will become the lead candidate for that party at a national convention, usually held in July or August before the election. This lead candidate will be officially nominated as the representative for either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. Other parties also have their conventions. For example, there is a Libertarian convention and a Green Party convention where they nominate their candidates. The general election is held on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. People vote for their candidates, whether presidential candidates, federal senators, or members of the House of Representatives. After the election, the Electoral College meets in December to vote on the president. It is a process whereby the people who vote in November aren't voting directly for the candidates. They're voting for a representative who will represent them in the Electoral College to vote for a candidate. In most places, except for Maine and Nebraska, whatever candidate wins the majority of the votes in a state gets all the state's Electoral College votes. So the Electoral College, as I said, meets in December, and it's not a place, it's a process. For example, if you look at this map at Pennsylvania, you see that Pennsylvania is traditionally a blue state, or leans Democratic, and it has 20 Electoral College votes. There are as many Electoral College votes in total as there are senators and House of representatives in Congress, which is 538. So to be president, you have to get more than half of those votes. Pennsylvania has a law where the people you vote to represent you in the Electoral College, they don't necessarily have to vote the way you voted. So for example, if the majority of votes in a district go to, for example, the Republican, technically that person who was elected from that district to represent you in the Electoral College could vote for a Democrat. That almost never happens. So basically, each district votes for an Electoral College representative, and those representatives then vote in total in the Electoral College in December. This map is from the 2008 election when Obama ran against Romney as the Republican candidate. In the time period before the election, there are many polls. Polls are just samples of the population asking who are you going to vote for example. So in this poll, people were asked, do you prefer Romney or Obama? The majority preferred in this poll Obama. 22% were still undecided. And you'll hear mention on the news of these polls every week pretty much in the run-up to the elections. The primaries are where the parties are picking their candidate to represent the party in the general election. Here you see a screenshot from the TV of Donald Trump next to other Republican candidates. Donald Trump did get the nomination in 2016. Your book talks about political action committees. These are organizations that gather money from different sources and then give it to candidates or to the candidates' causes. For example, this is a political action committee organized by the United Steelworkers. The United Steelworkers might have a preference for a certain candidate based on how they stand on free trade and labor, and the Steelworkers PAC might fund one candidate much more than another. There are rules for how much money can be given by political action committees. These rules are very complex, but the bottom line is that these political action committees can give a lot of money to one candidate or the cause of one candidate and have a significant influence over the electoral process. That is all for page 450 in the Kaplan book about the electoral system.